I want to ask you, to what extent you guys knew each other prior to this season. Did any of you had you crossed paths? Just jump in, no waiting.
Well, the one relationship I had that was like well before this was back in 1989. I was a manager of a Radio Shack, and I had a very petulant, tough employee who I knew was smart. I knew he had talent, but at that point, I was like, it's about Radio Shack, and it's about selling our products. And the employee's name was Tom McCarthy. And I said, and I remember giving this speech to Tom in the back break room. God damn it, Tom, this is Radio Shack. This isn't fuck around time. This is the big leagues. And Tom said to me, he goes, are you for real? And I go, I'm as for real as fucking the earth exploding with comets and coming to life. And he walked out of my office and he quit. And I said, I remember telling all the other employees, I go, that's a loser.
That is a very true story, and that is that's when I developed my interest in special interest groups.
Okay, so I want to go down the line and ask you if, for a moment, you can share something about one of the other four people's films that most impressed you, that you most envy, something that you saw in one of their movies that, you know, just kind of blew you away. And Lenny, you're up first.
Okay, I'm gonna pick Tom because I think he needs a little bit of love after that. I want to bring him back up. We put him down, we bring him back up. I was just, when I saw Tom's movie, I saw it in Telluride, so it was the first of the other movies that I saw this year, and I just, there's a level of understatement in it and naturalism, and he's also dealing with the flow of information, which is a hard thing to dramatize. And I just sat back and thought, that's like watching something straight from the best tradition of 70s American movie making, and I think it's fantastic.
Alejandro, you're up.
Give me a fiver.
Well, I think I saw incredible things in each of them. I have to say, when I saw your film, I couldn't believe how he has shot something so powerful in that space, and with this so reduced element, like this woman and this boy trapped there, and all that atmosphere creating in that, and how it suddenly turns. I mean, I think with few elements you did such a very impactful story, and I was really impressed by that. But the minimalism at the same time would cover so many things that were very profound and deep. I have expressed to Tom like my big. Really surprised. The film is so good, but it's only when I know that the director is in complete control in the whole thing, is the cast that he did, not only from the principals, but the victims, I think, were outstanding. And that's where sometimes films can collapse, when secondary roles doesn't fit in that same level. It's easy to suddenly sleep there, and every single face, every single performance is exactly in the right tone, and I was very impressed by that. And obviously I have just praised George that when I saw Mad Max, I was exhausted just to see the work there, the craft. I mean, it's absolutely just every second, every 2 seconds, he cut to another shot that is more powerful than the other one. And just to get right those things, the people doesn't realize how much work is behind that. And I was absolutely just having kind of post-traumatic syndrome of, as a director, saying, "Oh my God, I can't imagine how he went through that." And I would say with Adam, I have to say that I was so upset after finishing the film, and the way that such a complex thing he put it, with that kind of crazy experiments of putting everybody in different tones, playing with me that I didn't know how to follow things, but at the same time creating in me a very unsettled situation, which is exactly, I think, that you were trying to get with accommodating the thing and your choices of the editing. So what I'm saying, formally, I was very surprised and very shaken and very provoked. So I am absolutely honored and thrilled to be with these gentlemen in this year.
Tom M.
Well, no, I got to do that, don't I?
You just set a precedent.
Okay. No, I'm going to break from precedent just because I'm wedged between these two. So I'll just do that, which was, we're screening at the Directors Guild, and my clip was set between their two clips. So you can imagine. It was like that opening sequence, and then they pull back slowly from a talking phone. And then that fight sequence. And I was like, shit, I got a lot to learn. Which is true, because I couldn't do either, and in both cases, it's more than just technical wizardry. It's a complete master of the technical side with the emotional, and I think in both instances, and I was just saying this to George specifically backstage, but I think it really applies, how much these gentlemen tell in their films without any dialogue. And that terrifies me, and I like quiet films. I like space, and I like humanity, but we're just, like, you could literally watch it with the sound off and completely get the story, completely. And I think that's rare, and that is the work of guys working at the top of their game.
George?
Well, for me, it's what I've always loved about cinema is to go into an experience and somehow be invited up into the world on the screen. And then when you've left the cinema, it follows you for the longest time. And what I think is so extraordinary about these films is that they're all so different, and yet each of them gave me that experience. And it's really why I became a filmmaker. And the only other thing is that there are little moments, which I won't list now, in the films that once seen you won't forget. You get the total experience, which ultimately is the most important thing. But in each of these, there are moments and resonances and feelings that you keep on reflecting on and going back to. And I think for me, that's a measure of a great film. And to be sitting here with these guys, from none of whom I knew, and from different parts of the world, and there's a kind of, I'm just feel very, very privileged to be part of this process. It's really lovely.
I agree with George. It's amazing. I think we all have inside of us, an 11-year-old child bouncing around, a 30-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 50-year-old. And I feel like all these guys' movies appeal to those different age ranges. I feel like George Miller's movie, I just feel like the 13, 14-year-old in me is like, he is the fucking best ever. And then at the same time, the 47-year-old in me is like, how did he do that? And I feel the same with Alejandro. Like, I feel like what Alejandro did with tapping into this kind of, America's a weird story. We're very weird. There's a lot of violence. There's a lot of innovation. There's a lot of hope. And I feel like his movie, as raw and as visceral as it is, really tapped into those kinds of things. And I watched his movie and I just went, how the hell did he do this? And then Lenny, good Lord. I was joking with Lenny. I was like, if you told me I had to do a movie about a woman who was abducted, who had a child with a kid, I would go, no, never, ever, ever, ever. And then he does this movie and still finds a way to point towards the light and the hope. And by the end, I'm actually happier than the beginning. I'm blown away by what Lenny did. It's incredible. And Tom and I have been very upfront with the fact that I don't care for his movie. So congrats to everyone. I'm sorry. I love Tom, so I just like giving him a hard time. Tom's movie blew me away. And what I loved about Tom's movie was it did two things at once. It pointed towards a scandal that is really at kind of the heart between old faith-based kind of prehistoric man and new modern man, which is that like we believe in the church and God and we suffer for it blindly. But then what he did, which was so cool, which was he got into the idea of journalism, which has been lost in this corporate-controlled country that we live in. And I just was flabbergasted at the end, and he's one of my all-time favorites. I was raving to him about Win-Win, too, which, by the way, if you haven't seen that, see that as well. But yeah, this is an honor. This is really fun. I love movies, and these guys are masters.
So the five of you are experiencing something that few others can ever appreciate in terms of going through this season. Many of your movies, I guess, began at Telluride or along the road since Telluride, which was like 6 months ago. And so I'm sure on a certain level there are wonderful moments, many wonderful moments. There are also many soul-sucking moments, some of the questions that you have had to answer probably 7,000 times and things like that. So just humor the rest of us who can't really grasp what it must be like to be on this journey, which is ending in something like 17 days from now. Give us the high point and the low point of the last few months.
Okay, the high point for me was probably, it was on the 14th when they announced the nominees, and I come back from LA. I was in Dublin. The kids had gone to school. I went back to bed, which is my favorite thing to do. And my wife woke me up and said, "You're going to watch this." And I came downstairs and I flipped open the computer, and I was really particularly hoping that Brie was in really good shape to get a nomination, and anything else would be a bonus. And then Emma got nominated. That was amazing. I thought we were going to get 2. And then they were reading out the Best Director nominations, and I opened an email window because I thought, well, I'll wait till this part's over. I'll be fascinated to see who gets nominated. And then they read my name, and I just kept staring at the screen. And I thought, did I actually hear that? And then I saw my wife jumping around the kitchen, and I thought, well, she obviously heard that as well. So that was probably, that was pretty amazing. And then my phone exploded. My mother rang me. She had to pull the car in. She was crying on the side of the road, So that was a pretty amazing moment. What's the worst moment? There've definitely been times when I've done like those short form interviews, the ones where you do like 24-minute interviews one after another, and every single person says what first drew you to this project. And there's a kind of part where you really will yourself as a human being to be decent and answer this truthfully and honestly, but your body rebels. There's a sort of rictus thing that happens, and so a couple of those moments have been pretty tough.
Alejandro, why don't we start with the low, and then that way we'll build to the high.
All right, I got to chime in here.
Yeah, all right.
First of all, we have to give Scott Feinberg here a big hand for doing such a great job. But secondly, Scott Feinberg is one of my low moments. Because we did a Q&A not too long ago, and we've been doing this, like he said, for too long. And it is too long. It's lovely, we're honored, it's great spending, it's just too long. And you start to feel dirty and cheap. And I think self-loathing is the word that comes to mind. And you just want to kind of go back to work. And but one night, Scott was moderating a Q&A with me and a few of the actors, and we're just back on stage. He goes, "Any question you don't want?" And to Lenny's credit, I said, "Yeah, don't ask me what brought me to the material." No one ever asked a filmmaker that again. It's interesting, yes, but we get asked 1,000 times. And normally, as Adam points out, it's just the paycheck. We want to get paid. And so I said, don't ask me that. And he's like, got it. We walked on stage. He's welcome. And I saw his mind kind of twitching. And I thought, is Scott Feinberg okay, or is this bad? And Scott goes, so Tom, what brought you to the material? And I had such rage at Scott Feinberg at that moment. And then he went down and asked everybody else, what brought you to the material? And I remember just thinking, like, this is, in some ways it was hilarious, we laughed about it, but in other ways it's emblematic of this process where we do get asked a lot of the same things, and it's not a terribly creative part of the process. You know, most of us are most comfortable when we're just working. The one high point, and it's a little bit general, is the fact that I do get a chance to sit with each of these gentlemen up here, and many others who aren't up here who very well should be, because this whole competition is crazy in the arts. But you do get a chance to meet these wonderful writers and cinematographers and editors, and you just get 5-10 minutes. And for most of us who spend time in our own cities and countries and our own bubbles, that's just awesome. That's just gravy. So I think it's a really wonderful chance to have that little bit of window into other people's work and who they are as people.
I'll just say, Tom, you know how you can do too many Q&As and your brain gets fried. It works for the journalists too. Your brain goes, but Alejandro.
What did draw him?
Yeah, right.
Well, for me, it has been a little bit crazy because I have this crazy situation where I was fortunate to be nominated last year. In this 1 year ago, I was shooting Revenant. I was in the middle of the worst part of it, losing the snow, and I have to come not like 15% of what I have been doing now, but it still is reminiscent. And I suddenly, sometimes in the beginning, I remember, I went from I went from do a portrait of a suicidal man to a survivor. So suddenly I have to shift gears, or I was talking about the rhetoric of the creative process to the eloquence of the silence of a film. So I couldn't find exactly how I can talk about the film that I have just finished literally 3 months ago, and coming from suddenly the memories of being talking about other film that had just passed. So for me, it was a little difficult to get my mind in, and everything passes as when you are in a car, like everything is, and you spend 5 years about, doing a film and trying to figure out what is that film about, and then you are, as you were saying, like put in a microphone and explain what brought to you this, why you did that, why. So to suddenly reduce the film in 5 minutes, a work that you have done that you have even not understand, that you need perspective, is I think one of the most challenging things. That every time that I talk about it, I feel that I'm betraying it, that I'm reducing it, that I'm dirty. I mean, there's something that I feel that I'm reducing the whole thing to something. I said, what a bad film I did. When I talk about it, I say, my God, this is a bad film, because I cannot articulate it. And so that, I think, is one of the, I think the lowest moment, I have to say, was when, obviously, before I finished the film, these same magazines only came with an article, saying about all the over budget and all the disasters and the living hell that somebody said. I don't know who was that guy, but one guy was hell for him, but not for all of us. And suddenly have to come before finishing the film to explain or to justify something that nobody has seen it yet. And that was a very strange position. And that was a very complicated situation where we live now as media. And I understand and I appreciate the curiosity and people want to know, but suddenly you are accused by something that nobody has been even seen it or has a way to be understood. And that was kind of, I said, oh my God, now I go to something that so that's, I think, is a hard thing to do, which I share with all of them. And that's a very hard job, I have to say. And you appreciate it. I don't want to be in a way that say no, but it's hard when you do it. You cannot find a fresh way to articulate your thoughts. That's the most difficult thing. One of the highest moments is, I think, that two things: that the film was received by the audience. I think that is the biggest reward, I think, for us as a filmmaker, because you do films to be understood and expressed. So when a film works in that level, it's a fantastic thing. And the fact when the film was nominated for so many nominations for so many members of the crew, it was a love letter for the film itself and for all the people, not only one or two, but everybody that did such a great job with such great, power and develop, the boat. and that was, I think, a very beautiful moment that we share. I remember that I was sending emails to everybody, and Leo said, "Let's get a drink," and I said, "I'm going down," and suddenly Leo arrived with a bottle. "Let's get a drink," and I think that hug that we give each other was a very beautiful moment, sharing the joy of everybody. You know.
George, I guess you're up.
Well, it's such a blur that it's hard to pick moments, but that moment when you realize that the movie means something to people, which is unexpected, you never know. And when you have a series of those moments, in which way, whether it's sitting in an audience and people are responding viscerally moment to moment, they're the big moments.
When you see the eyes of the people, no, that after the screen, and you see the eyes of the people affected, that's the best thing.
Yes, and it just in the way that you know when people like your movie. You also know when people are being polite, and in this case, the enthusiasm it took me aback a number of times. The bad moments tend to come before. There's always doubt about a movie. You don't know if all the pieces fit together. And, I, like everyone else, we work in a kind of isolation. But I remember picking up those wonderful books that the AFI did on all the great directors. And when I read that in the interview with Billy Wilder, that when he saw the first cut of Some Like It Hot, he felt suicidal, and he wasn't joking. And I thought, wow, that's Billy Wilder saying that. So I felt a bit better about myself. I never quite got to suicidal, but the worst moment comes when you're making the movie and you're not sure if all the little pieces of the music are going to fit together. That's for me.
Thank you.
I would start with the high point was, I agree with all these gentlemen that you work hard in these movies, you try and get them to come out, you have that moment of doubt in the, when you're seeing the first cut, you're excited for your crew. Lenny's story about the Oscar, we had the same thing. We were just like, this is nuts that we're nominated and cheered. But the coolest thing was, and it's a new thing nowadays, was with social media. I just read a tweet from some guy that was like, whatever, from Tennessee. He was like 22 years old. And he said, just saw The Big Short, not sure how to feel. And I was like, I love that. That is great. That means he had a new feeling, a new sound hit him. And I've seen a bunch of those where like, I laughed, I was upset, and I'm sure we all feel that way with our movies. Like when you hear those kinds of things where you can tell someone's feeling something different for the first time, it's amazing. So that particular tweet I've mentioned a lot. I really loved it. The low point was actually, we're all tired. We've been on the road a lot, but Lenny actually invited me to a party at his house, and I thought, oh, a gentle Irish filmmaker, this will be really nice. Not at all. Bad scene. A lot of Russian mafia, crystal meth being cooked up. I could describe this night for hours, but I'll just give you the end, which is the sun is coming up and I have the barrel of a pistol in my mouth and a bunch of guys betting, and I'm naked, and I gotta be honest, about a month later I showed up in a porno mag and I was proud of how my body looked. That part was good, but don't let Lenny fool you. He's not a charming, elegiac, sensitive guy. He's a bad dude, really bad dude.
I love that everyone's clapping for that. He's a bad dude.
Not a good guy. Not a good guy.
All right, so to close out this evening, and let me first say thank you to all of you guys for being here and doing this.
Thank you.